Hello, welcome back to Cracking the Cryptic for a special episode where I am looking at a puzzle I solved 2 days ago. So, full disclosure, I have solved this puzzle already. Thank you so much to the very many people who congratulated me for winning the Times Crossword Championship this year. A feat, of course, of which I'm proud. But it was very unusual this year in that the final consisted of myself and 4 people under 40. Now, if you solve or attend the American Crossword Puzzle Tournament, or you go to Sudoku or Puzzle Championships, and probably many other fields of solving and brain games, you won't be surprised that young people are to the fore. But if you solve cryptic crosswords and you've attended the Times Crossword Championship at any point, you might be very surprised because by far the most proliferating demographic is older, balder white men like myself. And many of the same faces turn up year on year. And although we are wonderful people, there's quite a preponderance towards an older age group. And that's understandable to me. I've always explained that by saying that once you find cryptic crosswords and start enjoying them, you never give them up. So it's a hobby that stays with you forever. And therefore, the age demographic will tend to skew a bit older because you could take them up at the age of 20 or 30 or 40 or 50. But whichever you do, you'll still be doing them at the older ages and 60 and 70 and maybe beyond. So I'm not surprised that it's older people. I'm also not surprised that it's been older people who tend to win, because sometimes there is vocabulary in these puzzles and references that just aren't available to the younger group. I remember my friend Neil, he was in his 20s, and I can't remember if he would have won or he would have reached a very late stage. He might have won the championship or at least got on the podium had he known that to twit meant to tease somebody. I think one of the answers, funnily enough, was Twitter, which is quite a younger generation word, but not in the context of the clue, which didn't mention the app that has become known as X since. And Neil didn't know that if you were somebody who did teasing, you might be a Twitter, and went with Twister, I think. Anyway, very tough on somebody who just hasn't come across a word yet. This was the final puzzle. They've just published it in the newspaper today, along with a very nice article. I will try and provide a link to that article, but I suspect the article is behind the Times' paywall. Happily, the crossword isn't, so I'll provide a link to the crossword as well. You can have a go at it before watching me explain the clues and how I went about the puzzle, which is my plan, basically. So, without much further ado, I'm going to start talking you through this Times Championship final and my solve of it on Saturday. And I hope it's interesting. So, basically, we were suddenly told, all right, now you can start, turn over your pages. And we had these pages in front of us. There were 5 of us who had qualified for the final. Actually, okay, with a bit more further ado, I will tell you about the process for the day. 120 people had been accepted. All but 4 turned up, so there were 116 there. The plan was to have them attempt 3 crosswords within an hour, and the best 50% of the field would make it into the second round. So that was 58 people who got into round 2. I think the solving times that allowed you to access round 2 ranged from about 17 minutes to about 40. I believe, would get you into round 2 for the 3 crosswords together. I wasn't the first to hand in, so somebody I know from Crosswords, the setter twin, in fact, and I've done a video on one of his puzzles on our Patreon from the listener. He finished first, and I think I finished third in that round. But I was taking the time to check that every answer I'd written in was the one I'd meant to, and that probably cost me a minute there. So I was done in about 18 minutes for those first 3 puzzles. Then the second round, Simon was in it as well. He qualified for that. The second round was exactly the same format, but this time only the first 5 all corrects would qualify for the grand final, as they call it. And the times weren't very different. I finished that one in just under 18 minutes for the 3 puzzles. The next person to hand in, who I found later to be was Chloe Hutton, finished in just under 20 minutes, I think, so a couple of minutes behind my time. And then Colin Thomas, and then a couple of others, including Liam Hughes. I think the 4th finisher, Peter Steggles, turned out to have 1 error, sadly, and they therefore didn't qualify. No, the 5th, what are we up to? The 4th finisher? I'm not sure. They didn't qualify for the final, and Dave Gilbert did get in it. Who have I cruelly forgotten was in the final? There was me, Dave Gilbert, Colin Thomas, Chloe Hutton, and I don't remember who. So, sorry, that's poor preparation for the video. Anyway, the 5 of us were then sat at desks facing the audience with the script, and at a certain point we were told we could turn it over and begin. And I looked at this puzzle for the first time, and as I do, I looked at one across first, which says, MP ousted by Liberal, absolutely without authority. I decided that there was quite a lot of wordplay going on there. MP was quite possibly the letters MP. Liberal might quite possibly be the letter L. But with absolutely and without authority, both in the clue, it looked fairly complicated. I therefore had a quick look at one down, slightly shorter clue. One picked up heart and blood of God. Well, one of the areas favoured by Times compilers is classical mythology, and there are a few words associated with Greek gods that I have learnt over time. Greek gods ate ambrosia, they drank nectar, and their blood was ichor. And who knows why, but those are words that do crop up from time to time in the Times. So I'm assuming this is ichor, I-C-H-O-R, and I started to write it in even before checking the wordplay. One can be I, as in the Roman numeral, and then picked up heart. If you pick something up, you hear it. And if you pronounce the word core, C-O-R-E, it sounds exactly the same as the rest of this word, ichor. And that's what's going on there. It's the sound of the word heart. So I thought, well, this has worked looking at the shorter answer. So I thought I'd look at the shortest answer beginning with the letters I'd now got. 11 across said, go on, having lost last religious leader. And I have seen before a construction with rabbit, where you take off the last letter of rabbit and you have rabbi, and it was religious leader beginning with R, 5 letters. That immediately made me think rabbi, and then I could see that this was this classic construction of rabbit having lost its last letter. And that gave me rabbi. Now at this point, I was probably less than 20 seconds into looking at the puzzle, despite having looked at one across. And I realised at this point that this puzzle probably wasn't going to be very hard. The standard of clues in a puzzle is normally fairly consistent within that puzzle. And I began to get very worried, because if you've got 4 young people and me solving a puzzle that isn't going to hold many of us up, then it's probably down to just pure computing and writing speed in your head. So computing speed in your head and writing speed on the paper. And I thought, well, a shootout is not what's going to suit me. I was hoping for some hard words and some tough clues. and this might not be my puzzle, but you just have to plunge on. So now I thought, well, it would be quite a good idea to fill up quite a few of those check letters. And we've got a phrase here, 4335. I can't remember if the paper was marked with the lines between the words. I don't think it was, but anyway, I could see that 4335 would require the second word to begin with a B, which was rather surprising. So this wasn't going to be something and the something or something for the something. B, I didn't know what that was going to mean. So I read the clue, finally yet significantly beaten, aren't lost battles. And wow, I mean, I'm intrigued here because I thought that we were looking at an anagram, and I thought that beaten, aren't, and lost were in the anagram. Although when I look at those now, I can see that those are 14 letters, and the whole length of this is 15 letters. I mean, I know we were looking at an anagram, and I can see now, and I'm not sure I did see on the day, that the anagram fodder is actually aren't lost battles. So we have to jumble those letters. But that leaves, whichever way round, whether beaten or battles is the anagram indicator, it leaves finally yet significantly to be the definition. And given that B, I had been wondering about but, and it suddenly occurred to me that last but not least definitely satisfied not only the answer, but it was certainly using a lot of the letters involved in, well, whether it was beaten, aren't lost, or aren't lost battles. I don't know if I realised on the day that it was the last three words of the clue, but last but not least was the answer. And that probably took less than 15 seconds to think of, and maybe then 3 or 4 seconds to fill in. Now I have to try and remember where I went after that. I probably looked at 9 across. Yes, I think I did. H something S is, and I haven't looked at the clue at all at this stage. Adoring cry. Well, I'm immediately thinking of Hosanna from the Bible, which is, I think, what they cried at Jesus when he rode in on the donkey. So just a quick check that we've got the right parts of wordplay there. Enormous can be OS for outsize. Anna is a possible woman, and husband can be the letter H. So that's what's going on there. Then I did go to 1 across, thinking, okay, the clues are a bit easier than I was first thinking when I first looked at 1 across. So we might be able to come up with this. Without authority looked very likely to be the definition. Remember, the definition's always at the beginning or the end of the clue. So it's unlikely to be MP or MP ousted by Liberal, which not only don't really give useful definitions, but seem much more likely to be part of the wordplay. So without authority, well, I'm aware that illegal and illicit mean exactly the same thing and are the same length. So I was immediately thinking, well, this could easily be illegally or illicitly. And I could then see that one of the L's in illicitly, if it had MP instead, would be implicitly. And that means absolutely. So I was able to determine very quickly again that that answer was illicitly. So now I would have moved on to 3 down. Mob may trouble the French. And I'm lucky here because I know this word, whereas I heard later from Chloe that she didn't. And that must, I was trying to say, that must make this very hard to solve if you don't know this answer. So in the wordplay here, well, first of all, mob is the definition. The wordplay involves may, translating to can, trouble, translating to ail, what troubles you, what ails you, and the French, a very familiar crossword trope, can be le or la or les, les, and it's 80% of the time I would say it's le. So I just put those together to get this word canaille, which I am aware means the mob in the sense of the general public, the hoi polloi, the great unwashed. There's a lot of weird phrases that do crop up from time to time for the proletariat. and can I'm aware, means that. Now, I don't even like to think how many seconds that would take me if I'd never heard that word before. I moved straight on to 4 down after that. Burlesque. Now, I have seen burlesque clued in crosswords before, or in the clue, and intriguingly, although we don't use the word travesty to mean a burlesque anymore, I am aware that there is an origin of travesty. Well, travesty began as a word meaning a burlesque performance. It then became a word meaning something that was terrible or an absolute fiasco. And I think farce went on much the same journey. A farce starts out and is still sometimes a highly comical play, but the word gets probably used even more often metaphorically to mean something that was absolutely a terrible disaster. And here, I'd had a conversation with Simon just before the final in which his mention that there's always a hidden answer had come up. And here is the hidden answer. Within the words secret raves, typically, travesty is actually written in order. And therefore it is a component of that phrase, secret raves, typically. But frankly, having read burlesque and having T blank A at the beginning of an 8, I knew it was travesty anyway. I moved on to 5 down. Might not always take up a word with one letter, but it was a Y, which is a helpful letter. Funny money, and I'm immediately thinking, do I anagram money? Probed by A. Well, I do anagram money, and I stick an A in it, and I've got 6 letters, God, and a yeoman, which has a couple of meanings as far as I know. One is a farmer with his own land, and the other is a beefeater, a yeoman of the guard, which is a traditional English office, I believe, from the 14th or 15th centuries originally. Now, where did I go next? I probably went to 13 across with the 3 letters in, and I was thinking, well, this could be futility or mutilate. And the clue is female originally ignored, rate of birth and death. And that gave me pause because it wasn't either of the words I'd immediately considered. Female is often the letter F. So I was thinking, how do I make this futility when I can't see a definition of futility anywhere? Then I realized that death could be fatality, and that was better. So I was still a bit puzzled because there are clearly a few more words than I had been realizing would fit this space. And I would like to know why it's fatality in case it's not. And I have to admit, there must be a word for rate of birth, which is natality, that I don't know. But I decided that that must exist, and we must be talking here about F plus natality without an N, to give the fatality answer that I had thought might be right. So I'm still, to be honest, flying along at this stage. I reckon I'm 1.5 minutes in at this point of the puzzle. 13 down, I'd looked at that because I've got a starting F. If I can get this quickly, that's going to give me starting letters for 4 more words. Radical overhaul of sports image. And a motorsports image. I must read that carefully. And I did see motorsport, and I was immediately thinking F1, which translates into a crossword answer as FI. Well, given the F I've got in the grid, that seems very likely. I think I may even have written the I in without even thinking about whether it might be wrong. But there's not a lot in this clue. Radical overhaul of motorsports image. And I was thinking, oh, this is fire something. And I was thinking of fire sales, which are complete sales, or fire rousing, which is sort of rabble-rousing demagoguery. And I didn't really know if I knew the answer. And I started looking at other words, but my brain did keep thinking about it, and I think I looked at 17 across before I finished 13 down. But then I came back to 13 down and realised I knew the word firebrand, which means somebody who is revolutionary and trying to raise a rebel, basically. And radical can be a noun for exactly the same meaning. So I decided firebrand was right, and as I was writing it in, I realised it was an F1 rebrand, which is a very clever clue. I mean, F1 does have rebrands every now and then, and that would be an overhaul of motorsport's image. You have to read the whole of the wordplay as a clue to the sense of what you're writing in, which is a very clever way of putting it together. Then I went back to 17 across. Head of Interpol, I'm thinking I. Stops, I'm thinking it interrupts something. The corruption can be rot, and that leaves us with riot for debauchery. I thought that was reasonably straightforward. I jumped to 26 across because it was shorter than the others, and I've got a lot of the letters in it, therefore. The aforesaid bit of Morse, books retracted. And I'm reading that as I read it at the time. So the aforesaid might be the definition. Bit of Morse. Well, Morse code is dots and dashes. And the dots are sometimes called dits and the dashes are called dars. And I wondered if we were beginning with dit. And the aforesaid could be ditto. You use ditto to mean the same thing. The books retracted are the Old Testament, OT, going backwards. So then I looked at 21 across, because, again, the clues are not that hard, and I'm thinking with 2 early letters, this ought to be approachable. This was a bit of a stumbling point, though. Italian Braille, oddly, comprises of 2 characters. Now, oddly, in a crossword clue, can often mean you take the odd-numbered letters, and in Braille, they'd give you the quite useful B-A-L-E, which could begin this word, but that didn't really seem to make sense. Italian Braille oddly can also be an anagram indicator, and I was wondering about that. But I couldn't really work out what was going on. I think I would have moved to... No, I can't remember whether I tried 24 across next or 19 down. Probably 19 down because it ended in an O. Film company boss with 1 Oscar. Well, Oscar can be the letter O in the phonetic alphabet. A boss is, I'm very familiar with the non-work meaning of boss. On a shield, a boss is the kind of stud in the middle of it. And a film company can be a studio, so I was quite quick to piece together that stud with I for 1 again and O for Oscar gives studio, which is a film company. So then I had a look at 24 across. Both naked, baby and Nana slip into ditch. I did quite quickly think, well, naked might mean that I have to strip the outside letters from baby to give me ab. And then I was thinking, well, that could be abandon, which can mean ditch. And then I realized that you can strip the outside letters from Nana as well, and you've got aban. And then that requires slip into to mean don, which is very cleverly worded, actually, and is correct. And the answer is abandon. If you slip into something, you put it on, you don it. And now I'm still looking at this one again, back to this one, and I was a bit surprised that T had appeared in the word, because the bail beginning wasn't really working. And I wondered, am I meant to anagram the whole of Braille? But the oddly is a bit of a strange word there. And then it looked like the definition was the end of the clue, 2 characters or of 2 characters. And I thought of the word bilateral. I started to write it in on the basis that there were lots of these letters in Italian Braille, and that could well be it. But I did give myself a little pause to think about how this clue was working. And I suddenly realized that if you used IT for Italian and the letters of Braille, you only have 1 A and you have 2 I's instead, and bilateral doesn't work anymore. Now, the simplest change you could make to it to make it work is make it biliteral. And I'm not going to say I knew that was a word, But if it was a word, it would mean using 2 letters, perhaps, and of 2 characters perfectly defines that. The character in this case being a letter rather than a vibe or a type. So I had written A in the grid, and I scratched very carefully over it to make it clear I was writing an I now. And that gave me biliteral, which I was quite happy with. I think that was probably the second of the 3 words that Chloe didn't know, and I will have to admit I didn't know that word properly either. But it's put together in a way that I can see it probably is a word. What I don't think I appreciated during the solving is the very careful wording of the clue. And what it's not saying, which I had assumed it was saying, is anagram it for Italian and Braille, because that's throwing an abbreviation into the anagram fodder, which is a little frowned on sometimes. What it's actually saying is that Italian, IT, which is here in the middle of the word, is being comprised or taken in by the letters of Braille written oddly, which is B-I-L-E-R-A-L. And therefore comprised is having a meaning that is, comprises is having a very different meaning from what I had realised in the clue. I think I went on to 20 down. Union agreement, oddly unnoticed, sparked new spell of prosperity. Well, there's that word, oddly, again. And I was thinking that could mean we're ignoring the odd letters of some word, but in agreement, that would leave G-E-M-N. And I didn't really know what was going on here. The union is sometimes the letter U, so I was thinking about Uranus or Uranic. And I think I gave up thinking about that. I had a quick look at 15 down. Ruralist, half-cut, gallivanting round on wheels. And I really made nothing of that. A ruralist is someone who lives in the country, I suppose, or someone who likes the countryside. Half-cut often means chop a word in half. Now that would leave either rura or list from ruralist. I couldn't see how that was giving me anything here in the clue. Or I couldn't quickly think of wheels that would translate into an answer. So I think I went up to probably 12 across with the two letters supplied. Poor one-armed guards unlucky at first in love. Well, we have to read that slightly differently. Poor as an anagram indicator, one-armed, well that's 8 letters, and we're looking for a 9-letter answer. So how do we put another letter in with those? Well, if they were guarding unlucky at first, they might be protecting the letter U. So I'm looking for an anagram of one-armed and U to mean either love, in love. I wasn't sure if it was first in love because I was going quickly, and I realised enamoured would fit and would be the right answer. So I just went with that. Then 10 across is a phrase, so they're often a bit more guessable from the definition. Begins, and I was thinking, could it be opens up? Firing writers in publishing house. Well, the writers could be pens, and the publishing house could be OUP. And I was a bit puzzled about firing, which can mean to dismiss. I wasn't sure how that was playing in the clue until I realised that to open up might be to begin firing, very specifically. So in it went. Now, I probably had a quick look at 6 down. Do you know what I did? At this point, I think I confused myself. I thought maybe I should look at 8 down with the helpful P and D in it. But I looked at the clue for 6 down and thought it applied to 8 down. And I read Disheartened Sot with stories about alcohol, and I couldn't see how that applied to 8 down at all. So I'm afraid I made a bit of a fool of myself over that. Not for very many seconds, but for some. Then I think I went back to 6 down and was very surprised to read the same clue. You know, I don't know whether I misread 6 or 8 originally or just looked in the wrong place on the page. But then I read 6 down and realised that was the clue that was the answer with the clue about disheartened sot, which immediately looks like the letters S and T because the heart has been removed from that word. And I could think of stearol, and that worked very well because it sounds like an alcohol because it ends in OL. Wasn't sure about the chemistry. But after ST, the clue, the answer has law written backwards, and they could be stories. So that worked for me. 6 across. Yeah, travelling west, in my opinion, America is a country for its people. Well, in my opinion is IMO, fairly familiarly online now. So I was thinking, how can you get IMO in this? If it was travelling west, you'd get OMI. And I suddenly realised that Suomi is the Finnish word for Finland, which I don't know where I've come across it. I wasn't necessarily expecting to find it in a Times puzzle, but because it's a proper noun and it's very foreign, but I am aware of it, and I could realise that IMO US, all travelling to the west, would give Suomi, which is a country for its people. Now I moved on to 8 down and read the right clue, and I had the I at the beginning as well. Being careless, scratching right cheek. And I can see that impudence fits and means cheek. And I know that impudence is one letter away from some other word, which in this case is imprudence, which means being careless. If you then scratch or remove the R, you get impudence. So that was a very quick one. Then I looked at 7 down. I was expecting this to be observability or something in that area. I was a bit surprised to see punish subservient Scot for unhelpful behaviour. Well, I could see these letters. I was expecting a B, as I said, in the second letter, and I could see we've got a B and an O and a lot of S's in subservient Scot, and it feels like about the right number of letters. And I realised it's nothing to do with observe, although all of those letters are here, but unhelpful behaviour could be obstructiveness. So punish is an anagram indicator, and the letters of subservient Scot give obstructiveness, which I would not have checked rigorously on the day, I have to admit. But I was still going pretty fast. I reckon I'm about 3 minutes in at this point of the puzzle. Maybe, yeah, probably about that. 14 across, I was assuming would be icon, which gives a lot of well-worded clues, but it's not. Run over, ladies and gents, when cycling. To run over something with your eyes is to scan it. Ladies and gents can be toilets, and so can cans, at least in American slang. So cycling means starting the word at a different point and coming back to the beginning, and when you do that with cans, you get scan. So then did I look at 18 across? I did actually. I wasn't sure, and in fact I'm familiar with this grid, and I get a bit scared about the words starting here and here because you don't get the first letter, and if you have a mix of vowels in the unchecked letter spots, that can be quite difficult, despite the fact that you're getting letters in the grid. Not having the first letter in an answer is a, I don't know, it's a significant handicap. Anyway, here we had live on fringes of Fiji where it's warm. Well, I was immediately thinking FI can be the fringes of Fiji. Well, they can't go at the end of this, so they must be at the beginning. On is often used in Times clues to mean afterwards in an across clue. So if you put live, you will need something meaning live after these FI. And I did think of fireside. I mean, it's a bit like firebrand. There are quite a lot of compounds beginning fire. So fireside gives you reside following FI for the fringes of Fiji, and I got that. Then I noticed 22 across is a phrase. I think that the bars were on the puzzle, actually, because I don't know how I'm noticing that 22 across is going to be a phrase otherwise. Anyway, start to meddle with former pronoun twice. What nonsense. Well, again, this is pretty old slang. This could be the third word Chloe didn't know. But start to meddle looks very strongly like the letter M. The only phrase I could think of that starts with an M that looks like this is my eye. And that can mean I don't believe it, or that's rubbish, or goodness me. So it could mean what nonsense. The former pronoun twice is therefore ye twice, which is an old word for you. So that worked neatly. I think then I would have looked at 23 down. Yeah, quits contests lacking time. Again, pretty familiar crossword stuff. Quits, if you end up quits, it's evens. You are level with somebody else. And the contests here are events lacking T for time. Now, the next question is, where would I have looked next? I know where I looked next. I looked at 27 across, and this was a weird coincidence. About 2 or 3 days ago, or before the contest, I was doing some other puzzle and I saw exactly this clue. Now, that does not mean this is plagiarism. This clue is so neatly written that it occurred to me, I wonder if I've ever seen that before when I solved it earlier in the week. The answer is purchases, because that means buys, and it's putting cha, C-H-A, a word for tea, in bags, which in this case are purchases, but it's giving this perfect surface meaning about tea bags. And it's a very odd coincidence that I had seen exactly that clue within the few days before. I mean, maybe I will come across again at some point where I found it. I don't remember, but I had seen that clue, and that took me about 2 seconds to solve, therefore, which is handy. Now, I think at this point, I had another look at 15 down and still didn't really know what was going on in it. Ruralist half cut. I couldn't seem to cut out half of ruralist and leave anything that would make a word. I was thinking of someone who would like to live in fields, a field something, but that didn't really work anymore. I tried 20 down, and I was very surprised this didn't look like it was going to begin with a U anymore. And indeed, it even made me wonder, am I definitely right about purchases, which I've barely thought about? Because this construction doesn't seem to yield any words to me. So looked at the clue again. Union agreement, oddly unnoticed, sparked new spell of prosperity. And I suddenly realised that a prenup might be cunningly defined as a union agreement, an agreement to do with a marriage. Now, that left me wondering a couple of things. One, doesn't prenup have a hyphen in it? Two, isn't it an abbreviation for prenuptial agreement? And three, how does the wordplay work? I finally noticed that if I took the even letters of sparked, I could put them together with new is N and up for a spell of prosperity. I think I had a look at 25 across now and didn't have a clue what was going on with it. Person hollowing out middle of bread and pastry. Very unsure what was happening there. Could be a pastry, I don't know. Person could be a definition. Hollowing out, I wanted to hollow out the word middle perhaps and get just M and E left. Didn't really know what was happening. I had a look at 16 down now, which I hadn't looked at before. Drink up, initially missing gob. And I realised that gob can mean mouth, and that would fit here. So I was a bit surprised. Was there a drink ending in mouth? And then I realised that vermouth is a drink, and it ends with the letters of mouth, if not pronounced as mouth. And I have to admit, I think I wrote it in just assuming, well, I've started slowing down now. I'd better keep going, otherwise I'm in trouble. And it's very unlikely there's any other drink that ends in mouth, and it's very unlikely that gob means anything other than mouth. So it's probably right. And I think I probably only just now realised that the rest of the parsing of this is up translates to over, but it's initially missing, so you just get ver. I doubt very much that I knew that on the day at all. Because now I'm coming down to these two words left, and I'm probably nearly 4 minutes in at this point. Everything has gone really quickly, but on the other hand, I can see that everybody else in the room is writing really quickly as well. And I'm looking at these last two words, and I wondered about Gruyere, the cheese that would fit in 25 across, which is at least in the realm of food, but didn't really seem to fit the clue at all. And I couldn't work out what this was. So I went to 15 down again, ruralist, and I suddenly thought, well, I suppose a ruralist might be a villager. And there's a V in the middle of gallivanting, so maybe I'm wrong to be trying to half-cut the word ruralist, and I should be trying to half-cut the word gallivanting. And I just decided that the first half of gallivanting was definitely supplying a lot of the letters of villager, and I would go for it. And that would give me the G for Gruyere, which, if I couldn't think of anything else in the next minute or two, I would probably have to write in and hope was right. So I was happy enough with villager. I should explain now, as I didn't at the time to myself, that it's actually the letters of gallivanting in order. Once you half-cut gallivanting, you've got galliv, because it's 12 letters, you take the first 6. Once you turn them round, you've got villag. And then on, re, re, as in concerning, meaning on, that wheels around as well, and you've got villager. So it's a very cleverly worded clue that I didn't appreciate at all. But I'm left with 25 across, and nobody's handed in their answers yet. So I just need to solve this quickly and hold up my number. But I have no idea what this is about. Person hollowing out, middle of bread and pastry. So I made myself calm down and look at middle of bread. That looks like the letter E. We've had all of these, nana stripped off before, and fringes of Fiji and that sort of thing. So clearly the constructor is very happy with taking individual letters from words. Middle of bread, E. So that's probably the E at the end. So the first 6 letters could be a person hollowing out, and the whole thing could be a pastry. And now I'm going, well, it's quite likely to be a croissant type thing that I haven't heard of. That's possible. Although, having got to the end of a puzzle with 30 entries in, and having sort of heard of all of them, maybe we'll accept by literal, which felt like a word, but I wouldn't have said I knew it. I'm a bit surprised to be coming up against one that I don't know. But let's stick, I said to myself, with this plan. E is the middle of bread, and the beginning part of the word is a person hollowing out, whatever that is, and the whole thing is a pastry. So we've probably got an R there as part of the person hollowing out, and Gruyere still fits, but a Gruyere can't be a person hollowing out. Even taking into account that Guy could be a person, this just doesn't work. And I was wondering, could it be a gouter and a gouter? That seemed like a possible word, but does gout mean to hollow something out? To gut would, and is gout cognate with gut somehow? Can you gout something? And I was thinking there are words like gout, which means something similar in French, G-O-U-T-T-E. But I wasn't happy with that, and suddenly I thought, well, if you gouge something out, you're hollowing it. If you gouge out a piece of wood or even a loaf, you're putting a hollow into it. So gouger would give gougère, and I have never heard that word in my life, but gouger was so reasonable. I rechecked the wording of the clue. It could easily be gouger and then the middle of bread, and that might mean a pastry. And I thought, well, I don't have any time to risk. I've got to hold up my number. I didn't know exactly what time I'd finished in, but it says up here that it was 4 minutes 38. So I hope this explanation that has taken about 40 minutes has been helpful to you. Let's submit that without being on the leaderboard, because there's no point in that with this time, or indeed given the fact that I have solved this puzzle before. But I thought you might be interested in hearing how I solved the Times crossword. Now, what then happened was I handed in my puzzle, wondered for some time about gougère. It's actually quite nice to have one thing to focus your mind on, to be panicked about gougère. It gave me no time to worry about whether vermouth might be wrong and whether I'd understood villager enough or any of the other multiple things that I might have written in without having a lot of time to think about them and got wrong. So I spent my whole time wondering, is gougere really a word, and what sort of a pastry would it be? And I barely started wondering when Chloe's number goes up. She was about, I think she finished after about 5 minutes and 5 or 10 seconds. So it turns out about half a minute behind me. It felt shorter, I can promise you. Then Colin's number went up, or possibly Liam Hughes. He was the other contestant. He came third, and he's also 27, the same as Chloe. Never turned up to the championship before. Liam Hughes turned up to the Times Championship for the first time in a year when, for only the second time ever, they had a prize for the best first time finish. Came third and didn't win that first time finish prize because Chloe was there as well. That's very unlucky. You don't get a second chance to win the first time appearance prize. And he came third. Amazing. Anyway, Colin turned out to have a mistake. So whether he finished third or fourth, he was put in fifth, and David Gilbert was put fourth. So, and every single person finished within 7 and a bit minutes. It was a very quick final puzzle. Now, I remember that when the day completed, by the way, with a very moving tribute to Richard Rogan, who was the editor of the Times Crossword and sadly died very suddenly this year. Richard's sisters were there to hear some really quite powerful tributes from the two Times Crossword, the two Times puzzle editors who were available, who had been Richard's boss, but had both very clearly been Richard's friend. And there were some great stories about Richard and how good a clue writer he was, which is absolutely true, and how good an editor, which is also true. And what a nice guy, and that is very much true. However, Mick did mention to me, Mick Hodgkin, the puzzles editor, that Richard's aim had always been that the final puzzles should be very much the standard puzzles that appeared in the paper, and the test should be of a normal crossword solving ability. Now, the amusing thing about that is 2 championships ago, when I did win it, I think the final puzzle was about that level. It was a standard level puzzle, and I even heard that Richard had put it in partly because he thought that I had an advantage with extremely hard puzzles. So last year, however, Richard himself compiled the final puzzle, and it was extraordinarily difficult, one of the hardest of the year. I did solve it in the audience, not under the pressure of being watched and having to hand in a number and having to be sure. And it took me 10 minutes. Matthew Marcus won with a time just under 20 minutes, although Peter Steggles, I think, finished in 17 minutes but had an error. That puzzle was extraordinarily difficult. This one, I thought, oh my goodness, are we back to the, let's have a race? And I was terrified about the race because these young minds are definitely very, very fast. I can't even bear to think how quick Chloe would have been if she'd known the word canai and whatever the other word. I think she also didn't know gougere, like myself, and one other word she said she didn't know, and she may have been estimating that, but it could easily have been biliteral. But you can imagine not knowing a lot of these. Suomi, Ikor, Stirol. I'd say not everybody knows these words, but they are very classic Times crossword words. I will accept gougere, which is not. And that's the story of this year's Times Crossword Championship. I hope it was interesting. Thank you for watching if you've got this far. And thank you for your congratulations before. It's been a pleasure to bring this to you. Hope to see you again soon on the channel. We'll be back on Friday with a masterclass of Friday's Times Crossword, which Simon will be having a go at. And there's always my very hard puzzles on our Patreon site if you want to see me really struggling. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.